Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Black Rain, starring Michael Douglas, Andy Garcia, Ken Takakura, Kate Capshaw, Yusaku Matsuda, and Louise Guzman for one scene, and directed by Ridley Scott. Now, we're in the territory of where I've never seen this. Let's just get straight into this movie. Nick Conklin, played by Michael Douglas, goes on a motorcycle ride in New York City as he's a New York cop and goes on a race with his buddy Frankie, played briefly by Louise Guzman in one scene only, against a young motorcyclist named The Kid, and wins the race. Now he's a character who feels like a douchebag, like last time in Someone to Watch Over Me, Tom Berenger. Michael Douglas comes off unlikable, as well as he's a divorced man with no personality whatsoever. Nick comes pick up a kid and sees a couple of his other kids and takes one of the kids to school, and I was a little confused if that was his kids as well as, yeah, you get my point. And Nick is on the way to work as he picks up his partner Charlie Vincent, played by Andy Garcia, who always comes off like a douchebag, but I like him as an actor as well. And Nick gets ready for work, and again, like last time, I don't like these characters, as director Ridley Scott does a bad job at making the audience care for the characters. Nick has some legal troubles, and Nick and Charlie go to an Italian restaurant slash bar where they see a suspicious group of Japanese gangsters in an Italian restaurant. And he says something in Japanese, or talks in Japanese, and then they bring up the Oya bun, which is the Japanese version of The Godfather, will not stand for this, and kills an Italian mobster, and Nick and Charlie go after them and catch one of them, who happens to be the movie's main villain, Sato, played by Yusaku Matsuda, who died in real life while fighting bladder cancer, which is very sad. And they take him on the plane to Japan, and like the last movie, this movie looks just as good as far as the cinematography is concerned, but so far, this movie is not that interesting. While on the plane with Nick and Charlie, Sato gets beat up by Nick as Charlie is about to go back to his seat, and they arrive in Japan, and the Oyabun pretends to be the arresting officers of Sato as he points his fingers like a gun at him until the real authorities come to the front of the plane and see they give a Sato to the wrong people, and they go to the police station. Which, remind me, these are the worst cops ever, right? Am I the only one dreaming this? We get some fish out of the water scenes, which feels absolutely unnecessary, while they talk with them about capturing Sato and waste each other's times, and they hand over the guns, and Nick feels like an asshole. While Charlie is he's nicer than him, I'll say anyways, but he comes off nicer than Nick, who seems very one note this whole movie, and that is very, very fucking irritating. Nick and Charlie get introduced to Masahiro, played by Ken Takakura, as they team up with him, and they go to a club where Nick asks Joyce, played by Steven Spielberg's wife Kate Capshaw, who I reviewed and was annoying as fuck in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, some questions about how she learned to speak Japanese, and she says Chicago, and Nick and Charlie go on a walk to the hotel until the Oyabun gangsters on motorcycles circle around Nick and Charlie, which can be very fucking dangerous. But like last time, I don't give a shit about the plot, as this is a fish out of water thriller that makes no goddamn sense. They look around for Sato like a bunch of jackasses, causing one scene after another, while they arrest every single one of them. And Nick asks them where Sato is at and doesn't give him shit, and he headbutts him while they're observing the damn place. And they go on a lunch break and go to some martial arts school and have a talk with someone who wants nothing to do with them, and they threaten each other, which is tedious. While this movie is way too fucking long, like at 15 minutes, I would say, if it could be in the editing room floor, Nick acts all racist towards Masahiro over what originality the Japanese have versus what the Americans have. And I hate talking like this, but this movie is not giving me much of a fucking choice, as director Ridley Scott handles it very poorly. And Charlie gets what's his name? Masahiro singing a Little Ray Charles on karaoke on stage, while Nick has another pointless chat, one of his pointless chats with Joyce, as the writing in this is very pointless. For example, she says what was said in the last movie, which is, "I'm on my side," and it proves my point, while a motorcycle gangster with the Oyabun picks a fight with Charlie, and they lead him to a parking garage where he gets decapitated. And despite his character was a douchebag, sure, I can't believe they would kill off Andy Garcia like that, as he's a better actor than what the material Ridley Scott gives him in this movie. And now we're stuck with the one-note Nick for the rest of the movie, when it becomes a cliched action movie that is from the 80s. And that is very one-note and very cliched. After the decapitation of Charlie, Joyce talks with Nick about his partner, as Masahiro finds Nick at Joyce's place or office. I was confused on what the place was, as he gives Charlie's things to Nick while he's devastated about Charlie's death and offers anything he wants. With Sato, Nick and Masahiro going back to the place where Nick headbutted someone who didn't give him shit at the airport earlier in the movie, tearing the place apart. And there's unfortunately nothing there until Nick sees some kind of drug called Seikens, which I don't know what the kind of drug is at all, as this was completely confusing. Nick and Masahiro have some dinner where another fish out of water scene comes in, as a hostess shows Nick how to eat some noodles with chopsticks, and talk about how Nick had a dark past he's not proud of, like taking money that doesn't belong to him. And Masahiro says he's disgraced himself and his family, like this movie is a disgrace for going way too damn far. As they go to a factory and following who I'm believing is Joyce, but it's not really her. It turns out to be a Japanese female, and whom I don't remember meeting earlier in the movie at all, until they see one of the Oyabun gang members, and they get in a taxi cab following them to a factory of some kind, as this movie is starting to become a mess at this point. Nick and Masahiro go inside the factory and see some drug dealing going on with some money involving Sato, and the cops get there as Nick approaches them and hides while Sato sends some goons out to go after Nick, and he shoots one of the gang members dead, and Nick chases after Sato until some stupid cops come in and to arrest Nick, and they bring him to an airplane out of Japan, and he's on it at first, but he'll eventually get off of it before they take off by sneaking into the baggage of the plane, or baggage claim, and gets off from there, which is a smart move but poorly done by Nick himself, and poorly executed as this movie is. Nick goes to Masahiro's apartment and asks for his help, but he says he's suspended and he can't help him, and kicks him out of his apartment, and he goes to Joyce to find the address to the suit guy, as well as food and cash, and he goes to a private place where people can play golf to give the suit guy the money, whom I'm getting the impression doesn't like Sato, but we'll see. So he can go to Sato and gets in a limousine and goes in his rich place, and he asks for Sato's location, and I'm confused to what's happening at this point in the film. They get to the middle of the fields where Nick hides around and looks for Sato, while Sato and the suit guy have a meeting, while Masahiro comes in to help Nick out by covering him, as Sato arrives at the meeting and they have it, and it goes wrong, and Sato stabs the suit guy in the hand with a knife, and a shootout begins, and the editing in this is super choppy. Nick goes on a motorcycle after Sato and have a fight until Nick gets wheeled on the ass, and Nick almost kills Sato, but instead he and Masahiro decides to take Sato in to police custody and put him in jail, as Masahiro gets Nick on the plane back to New York, and the climax was choppy, unconvincing, and very unsatisfying. Now it's time for my rating. I'll give this movie a 3.0 out of 10. Like last time, this movie looks good as far as the cinematography is concerned, but despite this is not a better movie than Someone to Watch Over Me, this is not an interesting movie. While the characters come off like douchebags, as Nick comes off like an asshole, and Charlie comes off like a douchebag, but he was nicer, and I don't like any of them, as I was getting vibes from Someone to Watch Over Me in not very good ways. I don't give a shit about the plot, as this is a fish out of water thriller that makes no goddamn sense, and this movie is just not engaging me as an action movie from director Ridley Scott, as this was a tedious movie, and it's way too fucking long at 2 hours and 5 minutes. At least 15 minutes could have been in the editing room floor. Director Ridley Scott pulls racism off poorly, as the main character feels like a racist motherfucker, and the writing is very pointless, and this is a non-recommendation because this movie is very one-note, and as it was again one-noted for the entire 2 hours and 5 minutes to the point, I can't stand it. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time I will be back with Thelma and Louise. And until then, don't be racist.